And then he gave them kind of a guidepost, here's the guy you should vote for, here's the guy you shouldn't go in a few key races. And he ended up having a pretty huge impact. After his campaign, the legislature reacted. They started trying to curtail Medicaid spending, which was driving property taxes. So I guess the point of what I'm saying is that if the media could do more, but it seems to me that if we had elected leaders who were able to bring to life why you should care about Albany, that would be a big help to the media.
I want to follow up on something that Wayne said, and also in our interchange before this meeting today, you brought out to me that you thought the next big change in Albany may be coming in the shift of the composition of the Senate. I would presume from Republican to Democratic control, but maybe as dramatic as a tie, as you say, is a possibility. But should the media be doing more to analyze this possibility and to point out the implications to people? Is anybody writing about what it would mean if there would be a draw or a shift from Republican to Democrat in the state Senate? These articles being done?
Well, some of the races are being followed, but it's still pretty early in the election cycle, and it's a presidential year with this incredible campaign going on. It's hard to find space to cover a Senate district race, but you got Trunzo, Cesar Trunzo, and do you say Cesar or Caesar?
Caesar recalls himself.
Caesar.
Yeah. He's 82 years old out on the island, and he's the invisible man of Albany, and I think his wife has lived in Florida most of the time for a few years, and he's certainly a vulnerable candidate. You have Surf Maltese in Queens, who's certainly a vulnerable candidate right in our neck of the woods and in the city of New York. And so, there are key races happening all over the state. There's an awful lot of stuff happening upstate in Erie County and in Rochester, where Democrats are making moves. So it looks like it could be a significant Democratic year in the state. I certainly think, the Republicans have controlled the Senate since 1966. And even then, the Democrats only controlled it for a single session, and it was 30 or 40 years before that the Republicans controlled it. So we are really talking about an extraordinary change if it happens. And it's particularly significant politically that if it happens now, then this will be the Senate that draws the lines in the future, and then we're going to have. Then probably they can draw lines that will guarantee a Democratic Senate deep into the future. I mean, that was thought before, and it hasn't always proven to be the case, but certainly if you can draw the lines, you can draw the lines in such a way, as the Republicans have drawn the lines. If you look at the current setup in the Senate, not only did they expand it as a result of the last Senate to 62 seats, but they drew the lines in such a way that this 5% deviation that federal courts allow, which is that there's a standard size for a Senate district, I think it's somewhere around 320,000, 340,000 people, and the courts will allow you, consistent with one person, one vote requirements, they'll allow you to go 5% below that. A district can be 5% below that mean population, or it can be 5% above it. So the lines were drawn in such a way as all the Republican districts outside the city of New York were drawn to be smaller districts within that 5% deviation below the mean. And all the Democratic districts, especially all the ones in the city, were drawn to be 5% above. So you had a 10% swing on these lines, and that is really the way, in fact, almost the entire growth in population that occurred between the 2000 census and the 1990 census occurred in the city of New York, and we got one less seat than we should have had by any fair means because of the way in which those lines were drawn. it's one thing to draw the lines to protect an incumbent, that happens all over the United States, but to draw the lines to create a new seat, all of this was done in very extraordinary fashion to maintain a Republican majority in what is a very, very Democratic state. And so, you know, certainly if the Democrats win control of the majority this time, it could fundamentally change the politics of New York. Now, the problem for the Democrats is that they have a number of people, starting with Pedro Espada, who just won a Democratic primary, who he actually crossed the aisle once and voted with the Republicans, and he may do it on a permanent basis. So there are a number, even if the Democrats win a majority of the seats, there have been a number of wavering Democrats. Carl Kruger in Brooklyn is another one who is now been empowered by the majority to chair a committee, even though he's a Democrat in a Republican-controlled legislature. So they may be able to pull one of those Democrats to vote for a Republican majority leader, even if they lose the majority. It's a very, very fascinating story, really, and I don't see why we as the media can't translate that into something very meaningful to readers. But what's going on with this Senate race is, I think, one of the most compelling stories in New York politics today.
Was the Elliot Spitzer scandal story a story about politics and Albany, or just another article about a wayward politician?
It was scandal. It was not a politics story. I mean, politics brought him down, but it was pure scandal, and sex sells.
It was kind of a colossal cosmic coincidence, because I mean, it tended to confirm some of the things people thought about him, but there was no rumor of this. He was not considered to be, like, actually his personal life seemed to be one of the better things about him. You know, he had a nice family, he exercised, he ate well, he was but so I say it's a coincidence because it reinforced all of the personality flaws that had weakened him really terribly, to the point where he had almost no influence in the legislature anymore. Everybody hated him or disliked him on a personal level, including his fellow Democrats. He was dead in the water. And so in a way, that scandal, looking back on it with a little bit of the distance, you know, and the cooling of all the passions, it sort of did everybody a favor, because, you know, now we have a governor who actually can get things done. And for a while there, we weren't sure how he was going to work out, but he seems to be finding his feet.
But are the media giving the current governor a free pass in the wake of that scandal and the turmoil?
I don't perceive it that way. I mean, I think when he's kind of made a kind of bargain. I don't know who he's made the bargain with, but he's going to focus on a few key things, which is mostly at this point saving the budget, you know, keeping the state's finances intact. And he's taking a surprisingly fiscally conservative line on that. He's fighting tax hikes. He's trying to restrain spending. And he's sort of letting everything else slide. You know, he's not going to try to do anything about campaign finance. In fact, he's going to raise money every which way he can. And he's not going to campaign hard against Senate Republicans, even though he might be inclined to. But that would get in the way of getting things done on the budget. So when he does a campaign, a fundraising event that looks kind of sleazy, he gets hit on it in the media, and there's editorials about it in columns. Or if he reaches an agreement with the legislature behind closed doors, people say, you know, you probably should have done that more publicly. But so I mean, he's not getting a free ride, but I think he's building up a sense of respect within the